Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Inside the GM Studio, a podcast all about that tabletop RPG hobby. I haven't said this in a long time. Mostly for the game masters, but you players out there, we love it when you come in, you talk to us, we talk to you. Yeah. We all work simpatico. I'm your host, Matt.
I'm David.
And it finally happened. I played in my first game of Triangle Agency. I had a ton of fun, and I hated it at the same time. It is fun because it is a
law of non-contradiction, Matt. That's not possible.
It's a goofy, it's a goofy, great time that you get to have with your friends because it's mostly a lot of just the game is. It's made to be goofy. It's made to be, like puzzles and whatnot. It's a narrative game that is meant to be fun times, which we did have. We all played goofy characters that we had a great time with. Dan, the guy that ran the game, came up with some cool puzzles, which this is another reason why I'm not a big fan of narrative type games. Triangle Agency, a lot of the mechanics are all narrative. How you play your character as well as your progression is all narrative based. And I'm more of an old school gamer where if I'm playing a game, I would like numbers and other things that help that just kind of make things happen, and I'd like to make rolls for shit. One of the number ones is he gave us the basic 3 riddles at one point in order to progress. And none of us are very smart. So I like to fall back on my character. If my character is smart, then I'd like to be able to roll something. I would like to be able to roll something because they're a lot smarter than me, and they might be able to figure these riddles out a little bit easier. We were able to figure out one riddle, and the other 2 were not very good riddles, so we failed them, and we took harm, which is their damage version, which then a roll does come in place where you have to ask the agency to roll back time pretty much, or to help you out. There's only 2 main reasons to roll anything. There is only 2 rolls, really. To use your powers and to ask the agency to roll back time for you. So that, I didn't have a lot of fun as a game. As a role-playing practice, sure, it was great. It was fun. We had a lot of laughs. It was a fun time to be had. But as a game, I found it boring. When we actually did start rolling dice and we started talking about mechanics, how things worked, it got really convoluted really quick. And I still don't like it. As much as I'll say I had a good time doing it, I still don't like it. I don't like it. It's not a good game.
Perhaps a clarification is you had a nice time, but you don't enjoy the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's you're like, all right, yeah. You're like, we're gonna roll back time, and you're like, no, that's not the kind of role playing I want. Like,
yeah.
But what's funny is it's almost like an Aurora Boreas, man. Like if you say you're more of an old school gamer, but actually a lot of OSRs are really that way. I mean, there are mechanics, but there's no leaning on your character. It's like, figure it out. And you're like, but I'm not good at puzzles. And it's like, oh, well, sucks to be you, right? So you're like, what the fuck, man? Can't I just like roll my intelligence? No. I know they're both that way if you go far enough in one direction.
I know there was a lot of people back then that were that way. It was just like, if you can't figure it out, tough fucking luck, dude. But I in real life have an intelligence of 8. My character here has an intelligence of 16. They should be able to figure this shit out.
Yeah,
where Matt cannot.
Are more focused on the players and not the characters. Like, it's just like, can you figure it out? Can you come up with clever ideas and solve puzzles and be innovative? And your character might not be, but that's fine. I don't care, And so we're actually probably almost solidly in the middle of the bell curve, I think. I don't like those crunchy OSRs for that reason, where they're just really like you're just floundering in the dark. But I don't like the super narrative games where it's like, you're like, I want to roll dice. It's called a role playing game. That's where the
Yeah.
roll comes from. Roll something to make a thing happen, you know?
Mm.
Like, um, so yeah, I'm with you, but I wouldn't characterize either of us as like firmly narrative players or firmly OSR players. And it's probably super bland to most people like listening to this show. They're like, "Oh, pick a fucking camp, shitheads." And we're just like, I don't know. I like the middle. I like the normal thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I like to have good narrative play, but I also want something to chew on. You know, I want some numbers to work with and something to build upon and also
it's
play
yeah,
with during the time.
just like I suspect that people that are deep cuts into all sorts of different role-playing games, you know, they play Blades in the Dark, or they play, Hyperborea, or they play Barbarians of Lumeria like we do occasionally, or they play Call of Cthulhu. And when we
Mm.
say no, D&D is just the best role-playing game, they're just like, oh, whatever, dude. Like it's just you're
Mhm.
just saying that because it's the most popular. It's like no, it's the most popular because it's the best. Like yeah, I'm sure they cringe at that. Like if you were to say I don't know, like the most whatever the most mainstream thing is, the most talented artist ever is Taylor Swift. Like
Mm.
like if you were like told that to an audiophile that likes the Velvet Underground and the Clash and shit, they would be like, yeah, but
Yeah,
lowest common denominator, man. Like you know,
but she makes a lot of money, sells them
mm-hmm.
albums.
Yep.
Must be
But yeah,
something.
yeah. I mean, I get it. If you're just solely focused on numbers, right? I call people out on this all the time when they tell me that something is popular. And I'm like, my response to it is always McDonald's makes the best cheeseburgers because they make the most cheeseburgers. It's
Uh-huh.
like
Yep.
popularity is not an indicator of quality in its own right, but you do have to accept that if something is wildly popular, it must resonate with audiences. And when you're talking about a piece of art or trying to get somebody to consume your product, then what resonates with the lowest common denominator, one out of one people like this thing, um, there is probably something to learn from it, even if you don't fully assimilate into that view.
Mhm.
But I'll die on the hill that D&D is, especially because it's not coming from a place of a lack of experience, right? You and I have played all kinds of fucking role-playing games between the two of us, and yet we continue to come back to this one because its evolution and its streamlining and playtesting has just been the best over the years. And one could argue that that is just because when Wizards bought D&D, they just threw tons of money at it, right? They
Mhm.
threw so much money at it that like of course it's going to be streamlined. Like any product that goes through rigorous R&D, like some little indie game that had like five guys being like, "This is really good. I like this mechanic." It's like that's not going to resonate with a wide audience because you don't have the R&D to go along with it. I mean, that's a fair point, but I don't
Mhm.
know that it changes the results of the equation here.
Well, that's why the big three are the big three: D&D,
Hmm.
Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu. They
Hmm.
have, well, first of all, um they have a history. Of course, D&D being the most recognized
Hmm.
role-playing game of all time. Call of Cthulhu's been around for a very long time, and it's made a big name for itself. And Pathfinder, of course, was the one that said when fourth edition, Dungeons and Dragons fourth edition came out, they were like, "Ugh, fuck this. We're
Keep it
gonna
like it is.
we're gonna do third edition." And of course, they just became very popular because of it, especially in the power gamer uh, realm. Because of
Right.
that was the
They
only thing I
carved out a
can really
niche.
say that I like about Pathfinder is the buildability, yeah, of being able to make whatever the fuck you want. They have rules for creating classes if you want to make your own class, spells, weapons. If you want to make it, you can, and they have very structured rules to make sure that it stays without being too power gaming
Yeah.
for the actual the game that you're playing. And I like that. That's good for them. Everyone else, yes. Like hell, fucking Draw Steel. They had a playtest group that they all paid of like 60 people, and the game still sucks. So sometimes no matter how
Which,
much money you throw at it, it's not going to come out great. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people
but
that really like Draw Steel, but oh boy.
Pathfinder carved out a niche for itself by the people that didn't want D&D to change, and that was their success. But I would argue as a counterpoint to the it's popular because it's good, I actually I think that Call of Cthulhu has carved out a role for itself simply on thematic elements, and that
Hmm.
another game is a better game and it's a detriment to it because of thematic elements, and that's VTM. VTM is a better game, like from a game standpoint,
Hmm.
is a better game than Call of
I
Cthulhu
agree.
system wise. But because it deals with these like dark gothic role playing and like inner demons, and Call of Cthulhu deals with more like cosmic horror, I think the cosmic horror genre is just more popular than the kind of like existential dread drama. And so consequently, the people gravitate toward that game, and that's fine. But I
Mhm.
maintain that VTM is probably, I would say, even a better system than Pathfinder for beginners.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. VTM is pretty much just Shadowrun Light, which I think is good. I think it's
Hmm.
very good. Both of them
Hmm.
pretty much work on the same premise, the pool system. One is D6, the other one is D10. But VTM kept it nice and light, where their dice pools were a little bit smaller. Where in Shadowrun, you can get anywhere up to like 12, 13, 15 dice sometimes. Where VTM, it's nice. They try to keep it down to
Yeah.
more of like around 6 or 7, which I think is very good. They tried to do that with Shadowrun 6th edition. They tried to bring down the dice pools a little bit, and no matter what, it's always going to continue to happen. Things kept coming out, and now the dice pools are back up to the same amount that they have been in the last fifth edition and 4th edition. So I don't think it's going anywhere. If you're
Mhm.
playing Shadowrun, you're going to be rolling a lot of dice. That's why when I was
Well,
playing
like
at a
we've
table,
talked about.
I got the little d6s, the ones that you use for Warhammer and whatnot. Those are really good. They work very well with Shadowrun.
Well, we discussed this before, but it's probably just because Shadowrun is more conducive to having more like an espionage-based cyberpunk game is going to have more gradients of uh like technical skills. Like in VTM, it's not as much. I mean, yeah, you could play like a hacker or like a some sort of technocrat or somebody that's
Hmm.
got like, repair skills. But they're typically orthogonal to the plot, and unless your GM is designing chronicles and stories around those sort of elements. And they do have the extended successes and stuff like that, so
Hmm.
extended tasks. So that can play into it, but it's less necessary for VTM because of the themes and the motifs that the game explores.
Hmm. Yeah, and Shadowrun is a little bit more. They want to very much virtualize real life. Like, because if just like, oh, if I put this scope on, I get an additional 2 dice. If I use this type of
Hmm.
ammo, it's going to do a little bit of extra piercing damage, so my AP is going to go up by 2. And if I'm 200 yards farther away, my difficulty is going to go down, or I have to get rid of 2 dice. And they get very crazy about every little thing you do is going to affect something. And it's down to the point
Yeah,
where if you have a certain type of grip on your gun, uh, they want to make it that you have complete control over making it as powerful or as difficult to use as possible. Which is one of the parts where just like, I think Vampire does that better as well, because they make it a little bit simpler. But I'm not afraid of it. I actually sometimes I
well,
really
but
dig
again, it's
Shadowrun's whole go ahead and make it what you want. Uh, Details here are going to make everything uh, matter later on.
but but it has to do at least part and parcel for the game is external threats. I mean, vampires within the relative scope of the game are not often up against things that are just more powerful and a threat to them. The threat is often social and political, and occasionally you come across an enemy and there might be a fight or whatever. Uh, but as a general rule, it it's and even tires don't really pose like a real mortal threat to threat.
Hmm.
Sorry, I think I cut out there for a second.
Yeah, a little bit of hiccuping, but not bad.
Yeah, I was just saying that like most of the most of the hamstrung by the traditions, and then mortals are real no threat, and so it's like almost like your reputation in jeopardy. So the stakes are not.
Wow, that was the worst one. Didn't get anything out of
Yeah,
that one.
hopefully it doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, we didn't. I didn't hear a damn
I
thing out of that one.
okay. Hopefully it doesn't do it again.
Nope, it just did. Okay, let us see. Okay, so let's move on to today's topic. David had a very good idea. I don't even know why we didn't think about this shit. When we talk about damn near everything else about this hobby, everything else that has to do with this game, what have we not talked about? We haven't talked about maps. Now we're talking about, I don't know if you're talking about land maps, battle maps, hex maps, or are you trying to encapsulate all of them, David? When you talk about maps, which ones are you talking about?
Well, I wasn't talking so much about maps per se, but crafting a dungeon specifically, and that might
Mm.
that the idea of crafting a dungeon would transfer to how you lay out a map,
Hmm.
um, but it's almost an aside because if you're like me, you have challenges with designing something from the ground up. Like what is the layout of this, and um, what do I populate my dungeon with, and what's an appropriate scope, scale, size, and all of that. So I'm
Right.
not actually talking about literally drawing the map, but kind of the process that informs you as to what to draw and what to how to lay out. So maybe crafting like a a, a dungeon delve as it relates to how you would map out the dungeon delve is more kind of what I was thinking.
No, okay. All right. We'll start with that and then just watch, folks. Or actually, don't watch because you can't watch shit. You can listen. Listen, folks, as Dave begins to rant a little bit later on. As soon as he gets into it, it'll get into
Yeah.
something more than just the dungeon itself.
No, I wrote stuff down this time, so I'm gonna try to stay on point.
Hey, you gotta love a man that
The
knows
real
his own
trick will
weakness.
y- the the real challenge here will just be whether my internet kind of keeps up uh with my ramblings, I guess. So I came up with an 11-step process for um, crafting a dungeon delve to help you to inform you as to how best to not just draw the map, but craft the dungeon, I guess, from the
Hmm.
ground up. And some of it is going to be more high level than I think you're probably anticipating. But I do think it's not high level, it's actually groundwork, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the first step I came up with is to establish how epic your adventure is and where it fits into your overall campaign.
Hmm.
Okay. Uh, that doesn't seem like it's necessarily related to like the actual nuts and bolts of drawing out your map and deciding what encounters to go with you, but hear me out. We'll kind of balloon on this theme a little bit as it goes through. So you need to kind of first go, okay, where is the overall how does it fit into my campaign? Is this a short, furious quest? Is it one where there's a big payoff plot wise? Is it some sort of linchpin challenge where the group is eventually going to confront some sort of big bad and segue into like the second tier of your campaign? This is very important. And what this does is it allows you to frame your dungeon's scope and pacing. So without scope and pacing, you're not going to know how many rooms, you're not going to know what those rooms need to be shaped like, you're not going to know anything about the layout of your dungeon because you don't know uh, where it fits. So that's the first step. Think long and hard on that. Um, so step two will be for you to pick a theme. And again, here's where we get a little what might seem literary, but I want you to just kind of be patient with me and hopefully we can kind of I can justify why this maybe slightly more storytelling approach is going to benefit you in a concrete way when it comes to like designing your dungeons. So pick a theme, and basically what that is to do is to ensure that you're building, actually you're designing, and then eventually building with intention. So you know what your the central idea that your adventure is contending with. And this might not seem like it's related to the boots on the ground practicality of your design, but I assure you it is. So the theme should be summarized in kind of a single word first. Just pick a single word that encapsulates what your adventure is about. That could be something like friendship, fate, legacy, memory, trauma. Are you following along with me so far?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you for like a um uh like what you meant by or give us uh like your thoughts on what uh like your not the definition but an example when you're asking when you were talking about theme.
Yeah, yeah. So first start with just a single word that you want to explore. So I give some examples here: friendship, fate, legacy, memory, trauma. Right? These are broad themes. They are what your entire adventure distills down to. And what this does is it helps you simplify the components of whatever delve you're designing. And that legwork resonates throughout the whole creation process. Once you establish a single word, then expand the theme into a like a single short sentence. Um, and what that's going to do is it's going to give you a little more clarity as to what sort of message you're sending with the things that you're designing. So let's just say you're using friendship. You could say something like strong friendships position characters to overcome great adversity. Or if it were fate, it could be those that try to defy fate are doomed to fulfill it. Memory could be characters live on through their, or legacy could be characters live on through the legacy of their heroic deeds. Memory could be something like those that forget the past have no future. Or if you were to go with one, the last one I suggested, which is trauma, you could have it be something like societal trauma positions tyrants to seize control of civilizations. See how this kind of acts as almost a thesis statement for your adventure.
Okay.
Um, and so that's important. That's important because what you're going to do next, as this part of your theme, is you're going to pick plot points and imagery that infuse that theme throughout your entire dungeon. Are you following me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then after you've done that, then we start getting into kind of some more of the architecture of like a how you're going to design the adventure and how eventually you're going to lay it out when you sit down to draw it or use whatever software it is that you would use. So now you want to select a location and a plot line that illuminates those themes. And that just makes everything cohesive and relevant. So a theme of memory might take place in an old records hall, or it might focus on tracking down somebody that has amnesia. A theme of legacy could have statues or tapestries of heroes and their deeds, and maybe it might the plot might have to do with restoring like a noble's reputation or something. You use So if we were going to go with friendship, that could take place in some place like an old drinking hall, and it might involve the PCs rescuing a close NPC comrade or something, someone that used to be in the adventuring party or someone that everyone. Fate could be something that has to do with the heroes being chosen ones, and whatever location they're in might be an old temple with lots of prophecies on the walls or written in books or all over the place. Um, and trauma might just be something like an old battlefield with ghosts of the past, and maybe they're trying to, as the plot of the adventure, they're trying to stop some sort of genocide or natural disaster or something that would like traumatize the overall population. So then you start to get an idea of what the layout of the dungeon looks like in your head, because now you have a thing that it is. Um, and you have a plot that goes with it. So certain locations are ripe for certain types of plots. So make sure that they're in sync. And what you want to do after, as like a kind of sub point of this particular topic, is do a little bit of world building to determine what the dungeon's purpose is. Um, we've discussed this before. What was it used for?
Hmm.
Who put it here and why? There's nothing wrong with death trap dungeons, but you just need to recognize that they get stale if they're overused,
Right.
and they can often feel like, right, they can often just feel like a gauntlet of challenges without any purpose. And a gauntlet of challenges is easy to design. No one would ever
Hmm.
need any insight into how to do that. You just stack them on top of each other and make them as difficult as possible. Um, that seems easy enough.
I think
Anything to
I think a
interject
really
there
good
first?
way to kind of bring that about is the dungeon itself should have a story, should have its own story,
Mm-hmm.
really.
Mm-hmm.
Where like you were talking about, a death trap dungeon is just fine as long as you go through it, you kind of learn more about it, even if it is very minuscule. It's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and so now we're starting to get into the actual. You got that out of the way. You've established your general plot, as well as the scope and where it fits into your campaign. So now you're kind of ready to start building your dungeon. You're probably not ready to start drawing your maps and stuff yet, but you're ready to start building. So depending on your theme and scope, you need to decide the breakdown of different types of encounters that you want to include in the dungeon.
Hmm.
Uh, just determine them in broad terms. Don't build them yet. Okay, that's going to come later. Uh, and I know it seems like I'm kind of just given too much runway, but trust me, I think this is the correct order of operations. So in broad terms, these encounters are going to break down into a few different categories. Obviously, you're going to have combat encounters. You're going to have traps, role playing encounters, puzzles, exploration encounters, and then what I call texture encounters, so which are often just kind of like little weird things. But exploration encounter, for those that are less familiar with that, is something like finding a secret room, or um, the PCs need to uh, navigate from one point to another, and sometimes they're just empty rooms, but they should have something about them that's interesting. So the key here is to make sure that there is variety. Uh, you can get whatever you're looking for from your theme and your overall plot from any type of encounter. You really can. But some types are better positioned for uh, other themes or other types of pacing and motifs. So maybe you're going for a more fast-paced, action-driven dungeon, and if you are, then more danger, traps, and combat will be necessary. But maybe you want something to be a little more character-driven or plot-focused, then role-playing is going to fit that a little bit better. Mystery and intrigue, dread and texture are usually best achieved through exploration and what I'm calling texture encounters, which are just kind of things that build mood so that when something dramatic does happen, there's a lot of runway for it and the characters feel a sense of mystery and dread. So what this does when it comes to your design, your map making, your encounter building, is it allows you to tailor each location to whatever that encounter needs. So there'll be more on that later. But for now, let's move on to step 5. Unless Matt had anything to interject on those
Nope,
previous points.
not yet.
Okay, so now that you've done this, you want to determine what information you want the PCs to learn throughout the adventure. You could even just do a bullet point list of, I want PCs to learn X, Y, and Z, usually as it relates to the plot, sometimes as it relates to the characters, sometimes it might be all the overarching narrative of the campaign. But whatever it is, you should have a bucket of information that is best disseminated to the players. And once you have that bucket of information, then you go through and determine the best type of encounter to deliver that information. Sometimes it'll be combat, sometimes it'll be some sort of weird, like, environmental phenomenon, sometimes it'll be a book on a shelf, sometimes it'll be some sort of hidden shrine, sometimes it'll be a trap, even. That's probably the least likely, unless it has to do with kind of who architected the
Yeah.
dungeon. But some dungeons are more linear, okay? And some are a
Oh,
little
the
more.
bad guy's name is Trap Master. Oh, it
Yes,
makes sense
oh,
now.
snap. Yeah, exactly. Um, so some dungeons are more linear and others are going to be more sandboxy. The key to remember here is that if it's necessary that the information is chronological, and by that I mean like PCs learn thing A before they learn thing B, this will govern how you design your dungeon. You need to figure out ways to usher the PCs into the areas that you want them, um, and keep them out of other areas. So again, this goes to the direct concept of design. Like if you just have a series of rooms that are all in a row and it just goes from A to B to C to D to E, there's no way to kind of have a nonlinear sandbox structure. Most dungeons have areas where you come into a room and there's 3 doors, and you go through one of those doors and there's 2 doors, and then you go through one of those doors and there's 1 door, and then you go through that door and there's no doors, and then you go back, right? This is the way to kind of keep it sandboxy, but also somewhat linear. You don't want your PCs opening a door that has 8 doors, and then if they open one of those doors, there's 8 more doors on the other side, and if they open one
Yeah.
of those, there's 8 more doors. It's like fucking Jesus, right? So I think we've all designed dungeons that way before.
Oh, especially if you are a not on a VTT or if you are a theater of the mind um, game
Oh
master.
Jesus, fuck. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say again, Nate or David and I both know Nate Higley. You're probably listening to
Mm-hmm.
you're listening to this episode right now. Your dungeons, too many fucking doors, too many rooms, too many doors. When you first come in, we before we started having like print dungeons or VTTs that could show us what we're actually looking at. My God, man, you would walk in to the dungeon. You say you're in a 50 by 40 room. On the east wall, there's 5 doors. On the north wall, but we just came in through the north. Yes, but I know. But now look, when you're looking at it like this is like the north, right? So okay, so it's the south wall. South wall, there's 3 doors. There's one 10 feet from the east wall. It's like okay, whoa, hold on. Yeah, when you get a little too crazy, or if you get into the hallway that has 12 doors on it. Woo, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I
Yep.
didn't mean to derail
So
there, but that
what
is
you need
a
to do is no, no. This is a mistake I think a lot of people have made. So it's like there's nothing wrong with having things that happen chronologically. It's necessary at some points in the adventure, and then some points it's necessary to have things be a little more sandbox. Um, I guess what I'm getting at is that if there's certain things that need to happen in certain orders, like this group of rooms can only be accessed by 1 door, try to figure
mhm,
out a way to lock that door. Or put a magical ward on it where the password is in another corner of the dungeon. The key is in another corner of the dungeon. So the
mhm.
PCs have to go over to that other corner of the dungeon to get the thing. So There's nothing wrong with that, but it will govern how you design a particular dungeon crawl. So recognize that a sandbox approach, again, back to my point about tone, a sandbox approach makes for a more dynamic adventure, but a less mysterious one. If players can go anywhere and do anything through any door and just access any portion of the dungeon, they will have a lot of forward momentum and they will go like, dude, they will truck through things. But there'll be no intrigue. And consequently, if you go too far in the other direction where every single thing needs the players to figure out something, it'll be really mysterious and it'll engage them mentally, but it will kind of like slow down the dynamic nature of the adventure. So it just depends on how, I guess, action oriented versus cerebral you want the adventure to be. And that will play into the layout in a lot of ways that you're likely not thinking about. So think through it. Um, on to step 6. So now you've established the layout and you start with the types of encounters that best serve your overall tone and goal for the dungeon crawl. So if you want a fast-paced, action-oriented dungeon crawl, start thinking about the combat and trap encounters, the things that have danger in them. If you want more mystery, start thinking about the puzzles and the exploration encounters and some of the weird encounters. If you're going to have role-playing encounters, just realize they could probably go into one or the other camp, but you're going to just start with those encounters that are most relevant to your theme
Mhm.
and get you toward your goal for the plot of the adventure. At this point, it's okay to leave some encounters that don't obviously serve those goals, like a little underbaked or undetermined, like for instance, not fleshing out your exploration encounters if you're doing an action oriented dungeon crawl. Like you can just leave those kind of placeholdery, like you don't need to flesh them out at this point. We'll come back to that, but just remember to not overuse one type of encounter too much. And if you can, try to incorporate at least one instance of each type of encounter because variety is key. It stops things from getting stagnant. There doesn't need to be a lot of any given thing. You could have 70%. I would say if you're getting over 70% one type of encounter, you're verging on like too much. 70% in combat encounters like is not going to have the effect that you think it is to keep things action oriented. They're going to become stale. So you need a good mix. Um, so when you detail the information you want the PCs to learn, you also do something that's very key to the design of the adventure, which is you have a pretty good idea of where to anchor your cliffhangers, either in physical location or just by events that happen. But presumably, encounters are going to be tied to certain locales. Session is going to end, and then kind of to know where it's essential. And the reason that this is a good place to insert to kind of determine your cliffhangers is because typically a reveal of some sort of information, will be a source of intrigue that leaves the players wanting to go on to the next session. So once you've determined what information you want to disseminate, what types of encounters you want to disseminate it on, then you can kind of rank them in some sort of hierarchy of impact, and you'll have a good idea of like how to pace the adventure for maximum effect for cliffhangers and for getting through things in a timely manner. Anything to add to that, Matt?
No, not yet. Uh, the only thing that I really have to go on here is as you're talking about like you're pacing throughout the dungeon and uh make sure
Hmm.
to keep it different, keep it exciting through different means. Um, I don't know if you had it on yours, but whenever I think of a dungeon crawl, so there's two things that I want to get out of it. I either want to get out some history of it, or I want loot. Uh, you can't always
Sure.
go there just for the campaign. Yes, you have to go there to do something, but there's rewards that need to happen at some point. I don't know if you have that on your list or not, I don't mean to jump the gun or anything.
No, I do, but it's a little bit further down.
Oh, I'm sure.
Um, Actually, it is the point after the next one. Um, and it's tied to the next point, which is to break down each encounter and establish what it achieves.
Mm.
Uh, so if you're establishing what a thing achieves, any given encounter achieves, presumably for your plot, but it could be character motivation, or it could be,
It could
um,
be lore from your
it could
world.
have, right, right. It could be world building, which would be a way of kind of adding texture to the adventure. So, but it typically is going to fall into a few buckets. One, it's going to be something that raises the stakes, which is really important. Anytime you can have some information or some encounter that raises the stakes is going to typically be a good thing. Now, if you start off with high stakes and then you keep raising them, then you risk becoming kind of cartoonish at some point. But generally speaking, raising stakes is a good way to add something to the adventure. But you could also be adding mystery or intrigue, heightening the suspense or the dread. Of course, anything that pushes the plot forward is always a bonus.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it could also deepen characters or add some sort of complication, right? Two steps forward, one step back sort of situation. Uh, so once you've determined what a particular encounter achieves, then you can have an idea of where to place it in the dungeon, right? You want to set encounters in an area that not only makes logical sense, but can accommodate what you're envisioning happening. So don't put traps where the previous occupants of the dungeon would likely trip on them,
Hmm.
right? That trip them up. That makes no sense, right? This is an entryway to an old manor house, and the door and the porch and everything is just trapped all to get out. And you're just like, well, didn't people live here? Like, why would they trap the fuck out of this when they'd have to like go around the trap every time, right? Like that just makes no sense. So
Unless
think about the.
they're
Go
new
ahead.
residents of the place. Like if it's an old, if it was been abandoned forever and there's new, like the big thing is goblins have taken over the area. Maybe they put in some very crude traps, but
Right, right. No, but I've done this before where and had players call me out on it where it's like, yeah, there's like new inhabitants and there's one entry point and this trap is not like something where you go, okay, I walk up to it and because I know the trap's there, I flip the lever and it turns off and I walk past and then I flip the lever on the other side and it reactivates it. It's like, no, you have to do like this incredible thing where you like jump up on the ledge and like it's like so the goblins like every time they want to like take a shit they have to like fucking do this whole rigmarole. Like
yeah.
it makes no sense. Um, so I'm with you. Um, Similarly, something where like just the layout. I know you've done this because I've done it tons of times. Don't stage an encounter where the PCs are battling some massive undead horde in an area that's not big enough to accommodate that, right?
That
You
was
want
going
to
to be one of my
allow.
topics to bring up later. Yes, you are absolutely correct. I've done it more times than I want to admit. And I've told myself in between those times that I will never do that again. And I continue to do it.
Yeah, you need an area that allows the the tension to kind of breathe a little bit, right? If players are just kind of standing in a doorway hacking at fucking enemies surrounding them, it's really not very dynamic and it's
No.
really very dull. So big epic battles kind of call for things. If you're going to have role playing encounters, set them in intimate spaces. Don't set it in some giant, like, 100 by 100 foot room where, like, you see the guy and he's all the way across the room and you're yelling at him. And it's like, set it somewhere that's appropriate, an audience chamber or a study or, you know, some place where it's like pretty clear that the characters are right next to each other and they're having um, more of an intimate encounter because if you can see somebody 100 feet away then that as soon as you get sight of them then the role-playing encounter begins and you don't want a whole like feeling each other out and like jockeying and like yelling at each other it really saps the energy out of the encounter. The ideal uh, role playing encounter would be the PCs open a door to like a small study and there's just someone at the desk and you go, whoa, he's right there.
Mhm.
You know, he's not immediately a threat, and you kind of like begin talking, and that's more appropriate. And it also anchors in the player's minds um, what the environment that they're in is, so it doesn't feel jarring. So you get the idea there. So once you establish your mix of encounters, you should return to the idea of your theme, right? You craft the mix of encounters with your theme in mind. So uh, to kind of go with the themes that we were discussing that I gave as examples before. So if you were going to have a combat encounter and your theme were friendship, then maybe it's a group of adventurers that you're fighting, like other friends, right? That makes sense. Where if you wanted to design a trap that had the theme of fate, maybe it's the PCs are escaping a boulder that's rolling down a narrow hallway without any exits, right? Seems very like things only go in one direction, and you're kind of like, this is inevitable. That's like a theme of fate subtextually. So, a puzzle that fixates on the theme of legacy would probably have the PCs making some sort of history or religion checks to learn about the past, right? This all seems cohesive now, and you're building purpose. Uh, Anything to add to those points there so far, Matt?
I like where you're going with when you were talking about when you're designing the rooms, trying
Mhm.
not to make them, like you said, don't make them too small and don't make them too boring. Um, you can make simple rooms here and there because they make good for good rest spots in case you have to
Mhm.
do a short rest if you're playing D&D, short rest, long rest, whatever you have to do, depending on how deep your dungeon is. But also make them a little bit more intricate, like bridges. Fighting over bridges is really exciting because who knows? With a bad roll, you could fall over, or it gives you a little bit of extra stuff that you could push an enemy. This way, you have other mechanics that you've never really worked with before. Like I want anybody out there that has played D&D who has used the shove action. And if you have, how many times have you in the years that you've played Dungeons and Dragons, how many times have you used the shove action? Something to think about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of goes to my point about like when you're designing in certain locales with a certain intentionality, if that's a word.
Hmm.
Uh, um, then you can begin to kind of think about environmental phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Like what sort of things kind of go along with this room and would be interesting for a particular type of encounter. If you have a room that has like, like Matt said, some rickety bridge over it, and you're staging a role-playing encounter on that bridge, that doesn't seem like the best use of that, right? Like there should be a combat encounter or a trap or some sort of environmental phenomenon that is a hazard. Um, and consequently, if you like staging a battle in a kitchen is not typically the best unless you're trying to have it be kind of silly, like a goblin
Yeah.
grabs a pot and clangs you on the head, throws some boiling water in your face or something. That's more cartoonish and would be more at home in a more lighthearted kind of campaign. But serious battles are not waged in kitchens, and uh, so think about those things when you're designing your encounters. My next point, I'm going to allow you to get a little bit of more elaboration because all I have for point 8 is do the same thing with your treasure that you did with the encounters, right? Just think through how they play into the adventure. Think through what sort of things you're rewarding the players with, and
Mm.
are they in line with the challenges that they faced? And do they in some way bolster your theme, right? If you have some sort of, say, theme of that's is a much more whimsical, or perhaps even a theme of freedom or like liberty or something like that, something like a flying carpet is a great representation of that
Ooh.
theme.
Yeah.
And similarly, there's all sorts of weapons that maybe if you have a theme of
Mm.
vengeance, you can probably find some sort of weapon that's like, you know, you theme of vengeance, and you're populating your dungeon with revenants, right? Because they're just like a very vengeful creature, and you probably can find some sort of like weapon, maybe that's a sentient weapon or something that has something baked into it that feels appropriate. And you can do it at
Yeah.
all levels of rewards, right? Like some potions, a potion of heroism if you're going with the kind of heroic deeds theme or something to that effect. Just think through that and apply the same logic that you did to your encounters to the rewards that are there, both for logical cohesion. It doesn't make much sense that you would like you come into an old cave system where there's lots of oozes and trolls and monsters, and then there's just a treasure chest with like a old sword in it. It's like that seems kind of weird, but what if you can justify it and you've hinted at it before, like that maybe other adventurers have come in here and whatever, or maybe someone, give it a bit of lore, but when you just plunk things down that just seem to have no logical cohesion and don't go appropriately, when you start tying things together for logical and cohesion and thematic cohesion, everything will feel like it belongs.
Hmm.
And that's what you want for someone to grab something out of a treasure hoard and to go, this is appropriate, right? And it's just right down to the granular level. Like if you're at an old lighthouse or something, some sort of coastal environment, sure, there's nothing wrong with like populating the treasure hoard with sapphires and rubies or something. But wouldn't things like coral and pearls be more appropriate given that it's
Hmm.
coastal? And if you're more inland, you're in a dwarven excavation site or something, wouldn't like rare minerals or, gold ingots or something be more appropriate than the alternative? These little brushstrokes of kind of the flavor of the treasure are going to go a long way to adding texture to your dungeon.
Okay, hold on. I'm having
All
a
right,
sneezing fit.
Matt's having a sneezy fit.
So, when it comes to treasure, I'm right there with you, Dave. Because gold piece value isn't always the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, if you're on like a seaside uh, dungeon sort of thing where you find the bits of coral and whatnot, perhaps your dwarf character would. He sees something that it looks very valuable, but to his own bit, he wants to make it into a piece to put into his beard or something. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's very, very cool. Or, like you said, the whole dungeon has this theme of judgment. And then you get to the end, and there's a hammer of the accuser at the end. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be a magic item, but it's just known as the hammer of the accuser. That's just something very fucking cool to
It's
have at the
yeah,
very end.
yeah. I'm totally with you, and I'm always looking for things that are like never underestimate the value of something weird,
Hmm.
even if it's a mundane
That's
item.
why I was saying
Like,
gold piece value at the end isn't always the best. Sure, it
y-
might be worth a shit ton if they find, but like I know David has always been a big fan of art or these little bits and bobs at the end that are worth money at the end if you want to sell them, but they could be worth something else to that character or to one of the other player characters at the end of the dungeon.
no, it's I love when characters latch on to certain things. Like, I remember there was like back when we played third edition, one of the first adventures that we ran, there was like just a picture of the bugbear that you were fighting,
Hmm.
and someone was like, "Is that a fork stuck in his shoulder?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it looks like a fork stuck in his shoulder." And they were like, "Oh, I'm fucking taking that," right? Like, it was just like it was, and they just like had it. There was like, yeah, it's like a trophy,
Hmm.
or like Beto. The very first dungeon crawl that we ever went in, there was like all these in our Curse of Strahd campaign. There was all these niches, and they had all sorts of weird shit, and I just was just rattling it off. And Beto was like, "Whoa, back up! Did you just say that there's like a like a trench coat that's made out of like ghoul skin,
Hmm.
like stitched together out of ghoul skin?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what it looks like." And he's like, "Oh, I'm taking that." And he wore it the rest of the campaign. He had
Yeah.
this ghoul skin coat. He was just like, it was fucking. He was like, "This is like the coolest thing." It's because it's weird and it gives your character texture.
Yep.
So those sort of things, don't overlook them in favor of just a big pile of gold. And if you're gonna have something that has great impact, make sure it seems thematically relevant to your adventure, your dungeon crawl. So now we're going to go back. So remember all of those encounters that didn't seemingly serve your goals. because it's more action oriented and you want combat and traps, and you're like, okay, I got to have some exploration counters, and I've earmarked that they're going to be 3 exploration counters and 2 kind of texture encounters and 1 role-playing encounter, but I didn't flesh them out yet. Now is when you flesh them out. So you've put them here for variety, but now think of how you can incorporate your theme into these minor encounters. Put your fingerprints of your theme all over your dungeon at any opportunity you can, on the texture of the environment, on your descriptions of the actions. Just think about ways in which you can just infuse this, and it'll be like salt on a steak. Just a little bit will, with minimal effort, will provide, if they're thematic, will really tighten up the pace, because something that might have just otherwise been a dead room, it's just like it's just an empty room. It looks like a storeroom. Try to infuse some sort of texture into that, so that it might just be a paragraph of description, but it's got like all these thematic elements, and it'll either pique your characters, your PC's curiosity, and it might get them poking around, and in which case it's a good opportunity maybe to allow them to peel some different layers of something, or at the very least, it'll just contextualize and anchor in their mind the themes of the adventure. So we're getting to the end here, and now it is time to craft your encounters. So remember earlier I said determine your encounters. You don't want to build them yet, and there was a reason for that. This step is late in the process because I know that I have been, and probably even am currently guilty of this on some level. Um, you get it in your head that you want there to be a certain type of encounter, right? I want the PCs to fight a ogre in this room or whatever. This is a mistake. You should avoid it whenever you can, because first establish an encounter's goals and how it bolsters your theme. Okay? Once you have a stack of encounters, like a whole bunch of them, then determine their difficulty and how challenging you want them to be. Build encounters with how much you want to challenge your PCs. And that'll be based on their level, the Delt's pace, uh, and your player's capabilities. So setting encounter challenge is really, really essential, because it determines the pace. So uh, the last thing you want to do is design a dungeon that you think your PCs can get through in a 4 or 5 hour session, and they can't. So pacing is essential, and challenge has a lot to do with pacing. A challenging puzzle given to PCs that are really unaccustomed to them is going to crush your pacing, because they're going to take way longer to figure it out, and it's just going to feel like they're spinning their wheels. And on a similar note, if you're typically more role playing focused, or combat encounters tend to be kind of uh, fast and furious and not super challenging, if you give a battle to a PC that's got a lot of moving parts interacting with the environment, the monster's got a weakness, they have all these like sophisticated tactics, and they've set traps, and your PCs aren't used to that, that fight's going to take way longer than is necessary.
Hmm.
And it's just going to crush your pacing, and it's not going to serve your goals at all. I'm positive that every GM has been guilty of that, like at some point, and it's the reason it comes at the end of the process, because you want to establish what flavor and types of encounters before you establish how hard they are. You go, okay, now I have 5 combat encounters out of 12 rooms, and so which ones are hard, and where do they go, and what makes the most sense, right? Like I have 5 combat encounters. Now I've earmarked them for these rooms. This one is a bigger room, so maybe if I want a bigger encounter, I put it here to previous points. And maybe this one is a smaller encounter, but it's made more challenging. Maybe there's only one enemy, but it's made more challenging by the fact that there's confined space, or there's some sort of environmental hazard. Then you start to gauge the difficulty. And similar with puzzles and traps, role-playing encounters don't have a lot of difficulty unless you're creating a character that they're trying to kind of get some information out of
Mm.
within the context of the dungeon, and they're particularly obstinate or hard-headed or whatever. I mean, I've made role-playing encounters too easy, where it's just like the character just kind of spills the beans immediately the second the PCs talk to them. They're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And they're like, "By the way, I'm in this dungeon searching for my lost buddy, and I heard like all these rumors that like there was some gold in here in this room." And you're just like, they were just like, "Hey, you know," like, but but you also don't want to have them just like you, you know, be Johnny Tight Lips. You know, he's just laying there bleeding, and they're like, "What happened?" Like, I'm not saying nothing. You know, you're like, "Dude, we're here to help you," and it's like, "I don't care. I'm not no rat." You know, you're
Yeah.
like, it's like, okay, that doesn't serve your goals either. So that'll be determined by what your motifs are. You know, if you have a grim and dark and gritty uh, theme to your adventure, your delve, then the challenge for a role playing encounter might be amped up to 11. It's kind of hard to say, but nevertheless, I wouldn't jump the gun because what you'll do if you hand first and their difficulty, what you'll find yourself doing is trying to shoehorn encounters into an environment where they don't necessarily belong, instead of like designing an environment, laying the groundwork, and then populating it in an organic way that feels uh, that feels like it's a living area. If you don't do this, then the encounters might be challenging, but it'll throw a wrench in your pacing and your players' expectations and all this stuff, and you don't want to do that. So, um, Matt, any thoughts before I get to my last step in this process?
No, everything that you have listed out, I think I've given my 2 cents about everything that I would have gone on. So nope, I am all good on that.
Okay, so the final step, I really wanted it to be 10 steps, and then 11 just kind of mucked it up, but this is an essential step.
Eh,
Um,
this is a bonus
so,
step.
step 11, bonus step, is hint at the upcoming theme shift.
Oh, you
Uh,
son of a bitch!
this is
That's a
basically a
good one.
this is a segue into your next adventure. Ideally, by tying the Delves theme into the new one in some clever way, right? Uh, a lot of themes could easily hopscotch to one or another, like trauma and memory. I used both of these as examples. Trauma and memory probably could be connected. I mean, trauma and legacy could be connected. Memory and legacy could be connected. You know, legacy and friends could be connected. You don't really have to reach too far to try to link two themes together. However, you might not want to do that. You might want to deepen the theme that you already have put in place and continue to expound upon it. I know that in our D&D campaign, I really haven't been varying the theme so much as trying to deepen the kind of fatalistic, deterministic themes that
Mhm.
are in each adventure so that the campaign almost feels like one seamless adventure with just kind of chapter breaks. Some people prefer more episodic, like smaller arcs that build toward a bigger thing. Some people kind of just prefer the PCs to kind of climb a mountain, and the adventure breaks are just like a passage of time or a new goal that's been set or whatever. Either way, they're both are fine. But I would say if you're looking to deepen the theme that you're of your delve by adding to it in the next adventure, um, um, the is we've mentioned this before, but there's a new threat. That's always a way to raise the stakes. But there's a whole panoply of ways to do that. Um, Give the PC some new information, or usher them towards some sort of decision that they will make at the conclusion of the venture, but they haven't acted on yet. So it's kind of like this dangling participle where it like they'll act on it in the next adventure. This is a great time to skip forward in time where they um, fulfill that action, right? They decide they're gonna charter a ship to the other side of the continent to track down this bad guy, this MacGuffin, whatever it is. And then you know you can start right in the throes of that sea voyage or even just the arrival at the next place and get on with the action. That's a great way to do things. And that's a good tactic for any segue, not just one that deepens your themes. You can do it with a thematic shift as well. But if you're going to shift the tone and the theme, then at least allow the PCs to get a whiff of that shift. It'll cleanse their palate and make them hungry for what you have coming up next. And it also gives the delve a sense of finality and kind of closes the book on the theme that you've already delivered on, which is always a good thing. So that is my process and my list, and as long-winded as it was.
No, good work, David. You're always on point, and I'll make sure to put a good word in with the the 53rd floor about the work that you've been doing recently, and we'll see what we can do about a little bit of an extra bump in your next paycheck. But I do believe that this is going to bring us to the end of this episode. So all of you out there listening, if you would please for us send something in to Inside the GM Studio. Give us something to talk about. Just give us a little questions, some concerns, some comments, anything that you want us to talk about. Send it in. Let us know. It gives us content to give back to all of you. Perhaps other people want to hear some shit that you think would be good to know. Sure. Fuck it. Send it to Inside the GM Studio at gmail.com. Or you can come on over, watch us, usually live every Sunday at twitch.tv/Inside the GM Studio at 9 p.m. Eastern. Normally, you can go ahead and talk and chat. Got a couple people watching right now. It's very nice. But for this week, for Inside the GM Studio, I have been your host, Matt.
I am David.
Hey, good night.